I'd like to introduce Holly. Holly is the Executive Director of the Near North Mobile Media Lab.
Perfect.
And for the past 5 years, she's been establishing programs to engage youth and emerging artists through the digital and media arts. And then we have this long list of things that she's involved in. She serves on the board of the Media Arts Network of Ontario, chairs the Artist-Run Centre Whitewater Gallery, is Northern Rep for Cultural Industries Ontario North, and in her spare time, she is an active artist, musician touring with the Hidden Roots Collective. And I'm sure we'll find out more about you as time goes on. Okay, so please welcome Holly, and we're really looking forward to your presentation. We'll have time for some Q&A at the end. I have this sheet I'm supposed to fill out about links to translate. This is your. Make sure that you hit all these points here.
Oh,
yeah, so
nice.
Big ideas, action items, links to SPARC, all those kinds of things. So no pressure.
Okay, great. Be graded.
Holly, it's all yours.
Thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Holly Cunningham, or I like the idea that we're going by first name, so Holly. And I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that my colleague actually created this original description and the original presentation, and I'm definitely going to be hitting on all of these points, but I decided to expand it a little bit more, and I'm going to wrap in the idea of design thinking and how that plays into creating programs that are for multi-communities and creating programs that are to address problems that are in sectors or in individual communities. So I hope that that is beneficial for you. And I'm going to give you guys a bit of a background about the project, and then I'm going to talk a bit about the design thinking strategy of creating a program and how I unknowingly went through that process before I even knew what it was and how the different steps kind of fit into that. And then I'm going to attempt to do a couple of exercises with you guys that hopefully will get you kind of working in that design thinking mode. And then I'm going to come back to more specifics about the struggles that we've encountered with our project. And then maybe if we have time, I'm not sure if we will, but if we have time, we can open it up to the floor, or at any point in time that you guys feel inspired during this, feel free to talk about something that relates to your program or a question or anything like that. This is super informal. So the Digital Creator North project, basically it's 6 digital maker spaces across Northern Ontario in community centers. So we're in libraries, we're in museums and art centers. They're teen focused, so we do have an age group focus. It's 14 to 19, but we do have periphery ages that we do also include in some of our programming. So we can go as young as 11 to 13, and we also like to invite young adults who maybe are recent graduates of high school or pre-college into the program as well. And we specifically give them opportunities to work with video production, photography, graphic design, programming, coding, and many more other things, as Tyler or Steve could tell you, that teens are interested in that may fit into the digital realm. So one of the reasons that we believe that this is an important program is that the modern world is saturated in digital media, and it's vital for communities to have access to media arts education. And we were noticing that in Northern Ontario that wasn't happening as much as it was in other areas of the province. Also, youth are massive consumers of media, as we all know, and it's important. It's important to digital literacy to also be creating content. So in order to understand the media that you're consuming, you kind of need to also, at some point in your life, be a creator of that content. And a lot of these youth are in communities where they're experiencing the world beyond their communities through digital media. So they're online in social media, they're maybe playing video games with other people from around the world, and they're really experiencing the world from screens that they're using. Also, we wanted to encourage civic engagement beyond their own lives, and digital media is a great way to do that. It empowers them and gives them a voice. So Northern youth might feel like sometimes their voice isn't always heard. So today, I just wanted to also mention, I forgot to put in there, that the spaces are free, and they're open usually 3 to 4, maybe 5 days a week for basically like a drop-in type situation where teens can come in, and they just have to register. They can use their name. We don't ask for ID, so they can make up their name if they want, but we do get some information from them, what they'll let us take from them in terms of like their ages and things like that. It is a structured and unstructured program, so that means that there's workshops going on throughout the week or the month or the weekend, but there's also the opportunity to just come in and hang out, and they're not like forced to do anything at all. They can actually just come hang out, eat pizza, play video games, do their homework. So it's a really low pressure environment. And I'll kind of get to the specifics of where we got that idea and where all of those kind of the philosophy of that comes from. So today we have currently had 770 teens and young adults participate in a digital creator program or utilize the space. So our target goal with Trillium was 750, and that was over 3 years. We just opened over a year and a half ago, so we've already surpassed our target, so it's going very, very well. So this is a map of where we are. Starting at number 1, where this would be Sault Ste. Marie. Number 2 is Kenora. Number 3 is right here in New Liskeard, Haileybury. Number 4 is Timmins. Number 5 is Sioux Lookout, and number 1 was Elliott Lake. Number 6 is Sault Ste. Marie. So those are our spaces, and the headquarters that you see is North Bay, Ontario, and that's where our office is located. So as you can see, we're working across a massive expanse. Northern Ontario is the size of France, so we've had to sort of create different strategies to connect with each other.
Paul, you call it the near north, but you obviously expanded to.
Exactly. So when we we might have to change our name. So I just have a brief overview of where the spaces are. So Tyler is our digital creator program lead, and he's situated at the Timmins Museum. I love this photo of the space. And the Timmins Museum recently went through a Canada Cultural Spaces renovation, and they actually gave us a little space in their museum. They actually gave us our own dedicated area, which is amazing. And Sioux Lookout Public Library is another one of our I'd say one of our most popular spaces, even though it's the lowest population community that we're dealing with. And we also have our own room, so they gave us their media room, which wasn't getting as much use. And it's, as you can see, it's always full when it's open, so it's been an amazing space. They've got a green screen back there. And then Kenora Public Library, we're at the Keewatin branch, which is a little bit outside of the main town of Kenora, so that's been a challenge. But it's been seeing quite an uptake as of recently. And the Sault Ste. Marie Public Library, now this digital creative space is also very popular, very well populated. We are actually in the middle of the library and there's no separate room. So what's amazing about the Sault Ste. Marie Public Library is that they are okay with noise, they're okay with teens eating, so we were allowed to put it right in the middle of the library, and that was a bit of an experiment for us, and apparently they haven't had many complaints, and it's been going really well, so that's been, and it actually has a lot of visibility, so that might be also why the teens are really coming in. And we've got the Elliott Lake Lesterview Pearson Center. This one's been a bit of a challenge in terms of visibility and also just its location and getting teens out to the space, but it's also been picking up recently. And Timiskaming Shores. So we actually have technically we're working out of 2 branches, the Haileybury branch and Timiskaming Shores, the New Liskeard branch, and the dedicated space is in the New Liskeard Library. Yeah. And this is an old shot, but I'm going to show the video of the mural. Yeah. So that's sort of an overview. So I'm going to back it up now to 6 years ago. And that's me, really frustrated with crazy hair. And that is a rejected application to the Canada Council for the Arts.
Oh.
So this is how it all began. So I really do believe that failure is a good thing, and I think really amazing things come out of failure. And I had just written what I thought was the greatest application, where we were going to take our mobile lab, which we do have. I'm not going to touch too much on this in this particular talk, but we have a new one actually thanks to Canada Cultural Spaces, but we used to have a smaller mobile trailer that we would take on the road to do workshops and screenings and things like that. And I wrote a grant where we were going to take it all across Northern Ontario and do workshops in communities and try to basically solve the problem that there wasn't enough media artists in Northern Ontario, specifically mid-career and established media artists that were creating work. I was finding it really hard as the only media arts organization in the region to find those artists to program for our film festival, to bring in for exhibitions. It just, even to bring in as workshop instructors, I just wasn't finding them. And I'm like, well, why isn't this happening? Maybe we need a solution. So one of the solutions I had come up with early on was, well, we'll tour this, we'll tour our lab, we'll do workshops, we'll encourage people to make art, we'll give them tools, and we'll flow through and come back. Well, Canada Council was like, well, you already, you basically already do that, so we can't give you like another grant for that. And, basically they were like, we've seen that happen before, out of rejection. So as much as I was really bummed about that, I kind of continued on with the idea because I thought it was a good idea. And I knew there was a problem, or there appeared to be a problem, or some kind of issue that I wanted to fix, or I wanted to at least help alleviate. So I continued on thinking about how I would help that. So that's what this is about. This is me trying to solve the problem. So this is me waltzing into the Trillium office in Toronto with my idea, thinking it's handled, like I have the solution. And I walked into, I'll turn this off because it's distracting, but I walked into Sanjay. I don't know if you ever worked with Sanjay.
I am the new Sanjay.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So Sanjay, I called him up and I'm like, listen, I think I'm going to go for a Trillium grant for this project. And he's like, you know what, hold up. I think you need to give this more thought. So why don't you come down to Toronto, or I think I was already coming down to Toronto, and he said, come meet me in my office and we'll talk about this. So little did I know then that what Sanjay was trying to help me do was go through the design thinking process, because I had just plowed through and decided that this was the project that was going to happen, this was going to be the solution, and somehow I knew the answer. And he's like, well, you don't. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to apply for a grant. Back then there was no seed grow, but it was a similar situation where you could get smaller grants to do sort of the legwork or the beginning research of a project. And he basically told me that I was going to first consult with these communities, because I didn't know what was best for them. They knew what was best for them. So that's me, and now I'm looking at the design thinking map. So basically what he was asking me to do was to start to empathize. So develop a deep understanding of the challenge. And I couldn't understand that challenge until I understood the communities that I thought I was going to go and work in. So in 2013, we received our first Trillium grant to go across Northern Ontario and do consultations in communities with, educators, media artists, amateur media artists, gallery curators, people who are running film festivals, all that kind of stuff. And of course, just the general public and teens. We also were, consulting with youth. We decided to choose 6 communities to keep it manageable, and we chose communities that were considered mid-sized. So a lot of people ask me, well, why did you choose those 6 communities? We decided communities between populations of 5,000 and 75,000, which is considered mid-sized. So those were the communities that fell into that category, that were willing to work with us and that, in the end, wanted to participate in the project. We decided that particular population was close to North Bay. It was sort of like our, it was our expertise. We understood communities of sort of that size. And we also figured that communities that were bigger seemed to have a lot more going on, and they didn't quite maybe need this program as much as the smaller communities. So the second process of the design thinking was to try to clearly articulate the problem that we're trying to solve. So after we did the consultations across all of the communities, so I'm going to back it up. So empathizing. So developing a deep understanding of the challenge. So we consulted with 6 communities. We chose mid-sized Northern Ontario communities. And we connected with artists, educators, and community leaders. So some of the findings that a lot of the community members we're consulting with seemed to come up with, which I wasn't really actually thinking about as much, was a lack of media arts education in the school system. So a lot of these communities were talking about, and at the time I was really thinking about artists as adults. I was thinking about artists as, you know, the people who have graduated from college and are going to make movies. I really wasn't thinking about artists as maybe being teenagers and how those are going to be artists one day, and that if they're not receiving what they need at that time, where you're really inspired and you're going to think about where you're going to take the rest of your life, it's probably not going to happen. So that really opened my eyes. Again and again in these consultations, the communities kept talking about the teens. They kept talking about the youth. And I finally was like, okay, I'm going to listen to this. And this obviously is very important. The other thing was barriers to accessing equipment and space. So a lot of the communities were saying, well, you know, we don't know where we could get a camera. And if we do, we have to order it online. Or, you know, maybe there's a Best Buy in the closest large city nearby. But other than that, it's very hard for us to, you know, unless you have a lot of money, it's very hard for us to access that equipment. And then you also need space. So you need space to gather and sort of like get together as a community, collaborate with other people. If you're going to do meetings before you do a project or something like that, you're going to need space to gather. And so that was also something that was brought up. One of the other things that we were finding was that a lot of the media arts, a lot of the youth that were active in media arts were coming from wealthy families who were buying them equipment and who could send them to Toronto for a workshop in the summer or send them to art camp somewhere where they could make videos all summer. So it was there was an equity, you know, situation going on in a lot of these communities. That was eye-opening. So we created the report on the findings and we published it on our site, and we also shared it with our funders, just giving them the heads up. This is what we're kind of working on right now. I think some of them were scared. They're like, this feels really outside of what you normally do. But I think I was like, just trust us. So the third part of, I'm just going to go back to the design thinking, is to ideate. So brainstorm potential solutions, select and develop your solution. So I was at this moment where I was brainstorming, thinking about, you know, well, if it's not going to be, okay, so I also have to mention, one of the things that came out of a lot of the discussions was that they didn't want us to tour to them, to tour to their community, work in their community, and then leave. Because they had seen that so many times before, and it really wasn't changing the community. It wasn't really giving people access to anything. Unless it's a presentation, it's like, it's not really doing its job. So one of the things that was very clear to us was that they wanted resources to stay in the community, and they wanted more resources to be there. So they need staff members, and they want to have spaces, and they want to have equipment. They don't want this to just come in and leave. So I have to go back to the drawing board. A great idea. I have to rethink it. And one of the things I suddenly realized was like, why am I sitting here all by myself in my office in North Bay trying to think of this solution when there could have already been other solutions that have been made by other thinkers out there. It doesn't even necessarily have to be in media arts. It could be a great solution in another sector. So I started to do a little bit of research online. And one of the things that I found was this great conference happening in Los Angeles called the Digital Media Learning Conference. And their 2015 theme was equity by design. And I was like, well, that really hits the mark for me. A lot of the attendees were, they were working in small communities across the United States, but also across the world. So it was an international conference. And there was a lot of academics too. So it was a little outside of my comfort zone, but also extremely enticing. So I wrote a grant to the Canada Council for myself to go to the conference, and I ended up going, which was awesome. It helped that it was in Los Angeles. It was really cool to see that city. I'd never been there before. But from that really was a turning point in this whole process. So I got to see all of these different models that were in practice, and I also got to leave Canada, which I think was maybe a big deal, because at that point I was really only looking to my peers in my community or in Toronto or around the country that my networks knew of. And this was taking me way outside of that and exposing me to all these different programs and communities that I had never even thought about looking to. So now we get to the prototype part. So to develop a prototype, or a series of prototypes, as we have our series of prototypes in all the different communities, to test all or part of your solution. So the one amazing thing that I came upon at the conference was a program called U-Media, based in the Chicago Public Library. So U-Media is a program of 30 plus spaces, digital maker spaces, across all of the public library system in Chicago. And they have, I think they first started in 2009 as a 3-year pilot project, very similar to our situation. And their project has been extremely successful, and now it continues today. They've had huge successes like Chance the Rapper. I don't know if you guys know. He just won a Grammy last year. He started out at U-Media, recording his first album in their little audio booth. So they're getting so much amazing momentum, and they've had, by the time that we discovered them, or that I had discovered upon them, they'd already been doing it for like 7 years. So it was, there was a lot to pull from. So I connected with them at the conference, heard them speak, heard some of the academics behind the program speak, like Mimi Ito, who's an amazing academic from California, and sort of all about the theories behind the spaces and how they've grown and how they adapt to the teenagers' needs. And that's where we got ideas like, the teens don't have to be forced to do anything, because if you do that, they won't come in. And you should put a video game console in your space, because video games are actually great learning tools when they're played between teenagers and with each other. And it's also a great way to get them through the front door. And we just sort of started to grab all these amazing little ideas. So I decided, well, why can't, this would maybe really work in Northern Ontario, because we're dealing with lack of resources when it comes to space. So maybe we can go to libraries too, because there's so many libraries in Northern Ontario that are trying to integrate digital media learning into their institutions. They don't know where to begin. So maybe this could be a great partnership. Maybe we could go to museums or art centers or any other public institutions that would have the space, the security, and the supervision staff that we would need to run a program like this. So the next part would be working with community organizations. And I'm going to kind of touch on this a little bit later in my presentation, but essentially it was a long process of really connecting with these organizations and really feeling them out and going back and forth in a negotiation of figuring out whether this is going to work. And there were a lot of organizations and communities that we ended up not working with because we decided that this wasn't a good fit. So that, I would say, it took a lot longer than I thought it would, but it was worth the time because it made sure that our partnerships were good and that everybody was on the same page. So in May 2000, so this is actually pretty much around the time that all of our digital creator spaces were launching. I just wanted to kind of throw this in. So continuing our prototyping, we visited U-Media in Chicago. So they invited us to come to Chicago. We brought all the program leads from our 6 spaces. And we got to kind of just in person ask them how their programs run, troubleshoot with them, and also geek out in their makerspace, which was super cool. I think we were doing 3D printing right there. So yeah. Okay, so, so this is 4 months of running a really big children program with multiple community partners and funding stakeholders.
Oh,
That was my life for 4 months. There's no better representation of my life. So needless to say, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of drafting, rewriting, taking people out, putting people in, getting letters of support, looking to the model that we were adopting and trying to make that make sense to our community. So I think time is something that people don't realize is so important to take that time when you're developing a project. I think people have a project in mind and they're like, next year I'm going to launch it, or, you know, this was 5 years in the making by the time we actually started doing what we were doing. So it really does take that trial and error time. And now we are here at testing. So we are in year 2. We're actually just entered year 3 of a 3-year pilot project with a GROW grant from Trillium. Thank you, Trillium. And the idea of testing in design thinking is to engage in a continuous short cycle innovation process to continually improve your design. So as we are now actively working in these 6 communities, and we have 6 full-time staff members in each community as a mentor and also as a program person, they're also taking evaluation. So they're evaluating, you know, what programs are successful. They're evaluating, you know, qualitative data when there's amazing successes going on, and they're kind of taking that and reporting back, and then we're always trying to adapt and make the program better. And this might also, you know, at the beginning it also was true for things like equipment. So, you know, if there was a space that was like, well, there's a bunch of kids coming in and they want to use Raspberry Pis, they really want to get into robotics, then it was like, okay, well, we're going to have to find a way to fit this into the equipment budget. So kind of letting the users, which are the teams that are using the space, tell us what our programming was going to be. And that's always going on. It's even going on now in our 2nd year of being open. That's the other thing to mention. When I first received the Trillium grant, I had this idea that we would be launched in 3 months. Fast forward to, I think it was 8 months before we were actually launched. Like, we actually opened our spaces. So it took a lot longer than I thought it would. There was a lot of back and forth between our community stakeholders. There was a lot of places where we needed to finish renovations or, you know, make the spaces better. And finding the right staff members to work in those spaces, there was a lot to kind of work with there. So that was our first sort of wake-up call, I guess, and we had to adapt, but yeah. So, okay, so I'd like to do a little activity, and I would like, the activity's purpose is sort of to practice empathy in the context of design thinking. So I've given everybody one of those awesome Canada exercise books. So we're going to get into pairs, and I'm not sure if we have 2 pairs. Oh, perfect, we've got 12. That's awesome. So if everybody could get into a pair. Yeah, sure. Awesome. Okay.
This is pretty exciting. First day. What's our subject matter? What do we put on?
Oh, I don't know. Design thinking. Yeah.
Did you have more exercise books?
Oh,
I'll share.
you know
Okay.
what? I might not have enough, so you might have to, share pages. Yeah. So the topic is going to be community and or sector resources. So I want you to think about your community. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to mention that groups of 2, it's ideal if you're from different communities. So is everybody from a different community? Okay, great. So I want you to think about your own, where you work, okay, whether that be your workplace or the field that you work in, your artistic discipline, or your community. It could be your town or your city or your First Nations community that when it relates to the arts, I want you to think about the resources. And then one person will go first. You're going to air your own dreams and gripes for 5 to 7 minutes. While partner 2 listens and takes notes. So this means you're going to talk about the things that, when it comes to resources in the arts in your community or your sector, you're going to talk about the things that you'd like to happen. You're going to talk about the things that, you know, bother you. And you're just going to kind of like have a session of ranting for about 5 to 7 minutes. The other person's going to take notes, and their job is to be the empathetic ear. And then we're going to have partner 2 reframe the gripes and dreams into an open-ended question that makes for good innovation challenges. So so why don't we just start with the dreams and gripes first, and then we'll take it to the second. So we'll go 5 minutes. Awesome.
Holly, I'm looking at the time here,
Yes.
11:54,
Yes.
and I need 1 minute to say something at the end.
Okay.
So you have
All
5
right.
minutes.
Okay, great. So I'm hoping that you guys have taken away those questions. Like, I hope that that these will be a bit of a spark that will carry on the design thinking process in your own careers, and how, maybe you have problems that you want to solve in your communities or within your sectors. I'm thinking that we have, so I was going to go through a little bit, but I mean, just really quickly, we have a team of 6 leads that I was talking about. So, this project really is something that is a team effort. We recently hired a new program coordinator, so there's someone situated in North Bay that is the supervisor of these 6 employees, which is very important because it's a lot of work, like fielding calls and problem solving on their own, the daily challenges that arise in all of the spaces.
And Holly, are the leads part of that actual community?
A
Or
lot
have
of
they
them,
been,
a lot of them, like some leads are from other communities and have moved to that community.
Right.
Some leads are from the community itself, and either were at school in Toronto and they came back to the community to work on this project. And then, like in the case of Lane Helbling, who runs the space in Sioux Lookout, she's actually from Dryden, so she's very close, very familiar with the community. And we're finding that, there's been pros and cons on both sides of having leads come in from outside of the community, or leads that are already from the community. So it's a mix of both. And again, the challenge of finding employees within the smaller communities can be a real struggle. So places like Elliott Lake, we definitely brought someone in from outside of the community because there was not many people there that could take on that position. I just was going to talk quickly. I don't know if you're familiar with Basecamp, but it's one of many different online virtual offices, project management software. So this is how we stay connected. We've tried our hardest to build a regional team. And I don't know if you can see this, but this campfire is my favorite part because, as the leads know, they're always talking to each other, connecting, sharing ideas, talking about what worked, what didn't work, posting a video that they found where they, a
It's called
tutorial. Yeah, so I think it's $50 to $70 a month nonprofit rate, and basically it allows you to post files, share things with each other, chat. The one thing it doesn't do is telecommunications, but we just use Skype, and Skype works for us. So we found it very useful. There are other online platforms like Slack and I'm not sure if any Trello, yeah. Yep. So we found this extremely helpful for us. And then of course, support on site is support is on site for those working in libraries and museums. They obviously have supervisors that are partners, so they could be a librarian or they could be the museum curator that are also there as part of the contract with us. They get a free space, drop-in space for youth. They just have to also provide supervision or answer questions that have to do with, the actual space, like the facilities. And then, of course, a phone call away, we have our program coordinator who answers questions, helps them with, brainstorming ideas, helps them with equipment, maintenance, and all sorts of stuff that might arise. I just wanted to take a look at all the partners involved in the project and stakeholders. So it's a lot of people, a lot of different places that are, investing in this project. So it's a lot of trying to keep everyone on the same page, which can be challenging, but also, making sure that the vision stays the same. So it can be a bit of a balance in that way. And I guess I just would, at this point, could just open it up. We've got like maybe 1 minute for questions. But of course, it's lunch, and I'll be in that room over there. So if there's a question you guys have and you want to talk to me,
So buy Holly a beer.
yeah. So yeah.
thank you.
Thank you so much,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks for coming.